From the Gospel of Matthew. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure that had been hidden in a field, which a man found and hid. And from his joy he goes and sells the things he owns and purchases that field. The first thing I want to point out in my message today, Christ's wisdom, parables for living in heaven on earth, is that all of the parables of Jesus are just about that. How to live on this thing called earth in society, but to live from a place of heaven. The kingdom of heaven, it may be a place. It may be an alternate dimension. But for Jesus, first and foremost, it's a way of being. It's a consciousness. It's a divine choice available to us at any moment to choose love, to choose a higher way, to choose God's way. And Jesus, he says that the kingdom of heaven is within you, but he never tells us what the kingdom of heaven is. The kingdom of heaven is a greater consciousness that we develop through ongoing inner knowing. He won't just do that. He's always saying it's like. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast. It's like a pearl of great price. It's like a man who discovered a treasure buried in a field, sold everything he owned, and bought that field. The surface meaning is pretty clear. When you discover the kingdom of heaven, you value it more than any of your material possessions. And yet part of the magic of Jesus' parables, these spiritual riddles, is that he, in everyone, turns the common sense a little bit on its head. He challenges some of the practical wisdom of the time so that we can go deeper into our demonstration of the kingdom of heaven. In this particular parable, consider, why didn't the guy just take the treasure? Why does he need to buy the field? Was it that the treasure was too heavy? Perhaps it was something like oil, so he needed to own the land to cultivate it. Or perhaps it's not the kind of treasure that you use to buy material things. Perhaps it needs to stay buried. Perhaps the treasure is simply the knowledge that the kingdom of heaven exists. The knowledge that you are a part and related to something eternal. The knowledge that God is indeed with you when you associate yourself with that kingdom of heaven. Walker Percy, the author, once said, "Suppose you ask God for a miracle, and God says yes. How do you live your life differently?" It'd be great to say, "Yay, a miracle." But is not the greater miracle to know that God exists? To know that there's a presence and power who knows who you are and knows what you want? Is not the gift to know that this earth and our temporal existence is not all there is, but that we are grounded and connected with the true vine, with a spirit of love, with a spirit of everlasting life? And what does it mean to live like an eternal being on this earth? What does it mean to live like you are loved by a divine power? How do you live your life differently, knowing there's a treasure within you that you don't need to dig up, but as you live from, makes itself known in every relationship, in corner and area of your life? Jesus encounters a young man who asks, "Rabbi, how do I enter the kingdom of heaven?" And Jesus answers simply, "Follow the 10 commandments." And the young man says, "I've been doing that since I was a very young boy. Is there anything else?" And he says, Jesus back to him, "If you want to be perfect, take everything you own, give it to the poor, and follow me." And the young man clinches up. My apartment? What about my streaming services? My car? My bank account? And it is then following this story that Jesus shares the famous line that it's easier for a camel to enter the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And for me, at a deeper level, this saying isn't about saying it's wrong to be rich or there's something wrong with having possessions. The real point here is that when you're closer with the divine, you lose that attachment to those possessions. The real question I think Jesus is asking is what's getting you closer to God? And I ask you that this morning. What's getting you closer to your source? Feeling more connected with something sacred. What's getting you closer to your own soul so you can live it more vibrantly in your life? Anybody? I think of my little girl. She's right over there, being held by my other girl. And I love getting to sing with Nancy June, and I love getting to hold her when it's really quiet. That brings me closer to God. I think of preparing this message for you today. I think of getting to take a run in nature. What's getting you closer to your soul? Anybody? Grandkids. Our spiritual teachers. Flowers. Caring for animals. Sunsets. Hiking. Music. Get ready, my soul. Wasn't that amazing? Ooh. Yeah. There's a novelist by the name of Franz Werfel, and he said that thirst is the surest proof for the existence of water. Thirst is the surest proof for the existence of water. In the same way, that longing we have for spirit, that longing we have for connection with our soul, that longing we have for the eternal, it's the surest proof for the existence of the divine. And the thing about that which calls us closer to God, it doesn't just quench our thirst, it reveals just how thirsty we've been, just how thirsty we are to know our true nature and to become our true selves. What's getting you closer to God? And it's then that we can look at these possessions of ours and we can ask the question, what's keeping me from God? What's separating me from source? What is this thing that I've told myself is so important to who I am in society, to who I want you to believe that I am, that's keeping me? What's the habit or the addiction? What's the argument I keep having with so-and-so over and over in my head that never gets solved? What is that judgment that I carry around my neck about myself that's keeping me from God? That's what Jesus is inviting us to let go of and to follow and to welcome ourselves in to that divine kingdom. As religious scientists, our denomination, we're interested in the afterlife. We love to speculate about it. We love to talk about it. We love to explore it. But we're not as interested in finding heaven in the afterlife as we are about experiencing it in this life. This is the great depth of Jesus' parables, that the kingdom of heaven is not something to wait for tomorrow. It's something present in your right here and your right now. Something else I love about being a religious scientist is I'm not limited to just the Gospels. We love the Holy Bible here and hold it as sacred, but we love all the sources of wisdom about Jesus, including the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, and one of my favorites, Leo Tolstoy, arguably the greatest novelist of all time, late in his career, wrote his own translation of the Gospels called The Gospel in Brief. So the greatest novelist talking about perhaps the greatest story ever told. And I'm actually teaching a class online called The Mystical Jesus, to give a plug, that will be using that text. You can sign up online or at the event center. But here's a quote. And the Orthodox came to Jesus and began to ask how and when the kingdom of God would come. He answered them, The kingdom of God that I preach is not the one that previous prophets preached. They said that God would come with various types of visible appearances, and I am talking about such a kingdom of God, the coming of which will be impossible to see with the eyes. And if they tell you, look, it came or is coming, or look, here it is, do not believe them. The kingdom of God is not in a time or in any place. It is like lightning. It is here, there, and everywhere. And it has no time and no place, because the kingdom of God that I preach is within you. Jesus' larger parables, the ones that have narrative, tend to have a common theme in terms of their character structure. There's almost always a Lord or a master that symbolizes God or the way of the Spirit, the way of the kingdom of heaven. And then there's almost always an anti-hero, someone who, if not seen as a villain, would be seen as a sub-character in a narrative. And then lastly, there is the supposed hero. There's a character almost in all of these parables who follows the rules, who is supposed to be seen as an exemplary member of society. And it's through them that Jesus likes to turn that practical wisdom on its ear and challenge us to open our mind to a higher way of thinking and a greater way of loving in our lives. Take the parable of the prodigal son. There's a father, the master of the land, who symbolizes God, the nature of the kingdom of heaven, and his youngest son decides to take his inheritance and he blows it all. And he's sleeping with pigs. And he's so heartbroken, and he finally has the epiphany that perhaps I could go back home, go back to my father and ask for forgiveness. And he does just that, and the father rejoices, tears of joy. And there's so much love present that the largest party the household has ever had is held. And this is all painstaking to the heart of the other son, the oldest son, who's done everything right, has been totally loyal, and has always stayed close to his father. But now he's seeing this, and he can't believe it, and he can't help it. He shares his broken heart with his father, and his father can only reply, "My son was lost, and now he is found, but I love you just the same." And as much and as powerful as this parable is about forgiveness and redemption, to me it's just as powerful about that part of us that's self-righteous. That part of ourselves that can keep ourselves in a sad arrogance on the outside looking in at love, because we hold on to judgments, because we don't admit it, but we think we're better than other people. And in that self-righteousness, it's never heaven that rejects us. It's never God that doesn't let us in. We reject ourselves. We keep ourselves out of that divine choice and stay in a sorry kind of inaction that disconnects us from our source and makes us be who we know deep down we are not. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, we have a dying man lying on the side of the road that I would argue actually represents God or Jesus. And there's a priest and a Levite, two very highly respected people in the Jewish faith, and they don't help the man. We never find out why, but during this part in the Gospels, there's a lot of Orthodox folks yelling at Jesus for helping people on the Sabbath, for doing work. And then there's a Samaritan. And the Samaritan was seen by the majority of Jewish people in the first century as a lower caste. These were Jews who didn't follow the regular operating rules of order. And it's this Samaritan that helps the dying man. He doesn't just help him, he takes him to an inn and feeds him and bandages him and helps to make him whole. So this anti-hero comes and shows what it means to be good. And it's important to understand that for a Jewish person in the first century, hearing this is mind-boggling. It could even be infuriating. It's like if someone got up at the Democratic convention and said there once was a man whose car broke down leaving the Whole Foods parking lot. And he broke down on a road that almost no one drove past, and he put his hazard lights on, and the first thing that passed him by was an old VW bus covered with Bernie Sanders stickers. Next, what passed by was a Prius with a coexist sticker on it. No help either. And then finally, the biggest pickup truck you ever did see. That kind of pickup truck that you see on the road, and said, I didn't know that they make pickup trucks that big. It pulls over, and a man gets out with his MAGA hat on, and he looks under the hood, and he doesn't say a word to the man, and he closes the hood, and he attaches the tow to it, and takes it immediately to an auto parts store, knows what's wrong, fixes the part, and drives away. So Jesus is never interested in the ways of the earth. He's never trying to make a political statement about who's better or who's right and who's wrong. Because for him, the point of the kingdom of heaven is that there's only one humanity. Viktor Frankl said, for monotheism, as important as it is to believe in one God, we also have monothropism, which must follow as the belief in one humanity, that we are one people. And the great divine law is to love one another. Doesn't mean you can't disagree. Doesn't mean you can't argue. Doesn't mean you shouldn't separate yourselves from people that are living differently in a way that you don't agree with. However, there's this primordial being in each of us that thrives and comes to life when we love one another. And there is no one not worthy of the love of God. This was the core of Jesus' message. It is a message that was never given before. There is no one unworthy of God's love. And yet, who do we hold generally as most unworthy? Not even the people out there, but ourselves. To know our self-worth and to allow the love of God in is to embody the meaning and the purpose of the kingdom of heaven, and is to begin to weave it in our affairs on this place called earth. This message about our worthiness is at the heart of the parable of the laborers in the vineyard, where the master of the vineyard, representing the kingdom of heaven, invites our heroes early in the morning to come work in the vineyard for a denarius. And they're heroes because they're doing the right thing. They're hard workers. The early bird gets the worm. They should be the most rewarded. And yet there's more workers that come in all day, all the way up until sundown. And then when it's time to get paid, they all line up, and those that started working first line up last, and they see everybody get paid, and they get paid the same amount, and they're outraged. Wouldn't you be? I am. I would be. And so the anti-heroes have made just as much, and these men, they complain to the vineyard owner who says, am I not paying you what I told you I was going to pay to you? Can't I pay and do what I want with my own money? And again, he's challenging the way of the earth, but revealing to us the way of heaven, which is that it doesn't matter when you show up to the kingdom of heaven. It doesn't matter however long it takes anyone to turn to the divine. The love that comes to them is the same. If anything, the reward of showing up early is getting to know it sooner, to be one with that divinity and that love of who you are. Can you let yourself into that knowledge of a divine power that loves you? Can you recognize that that power lives in you and it calls you to express its love for others? And are you willing to realize that even these invisible aspects of life are more real than anything else? And we find not only our soul in them, but our sense of eternality, our calling to be who we really are. What does it mean to know that God exists, not just theoretically, but in every area of your life. What's getting you closer to God, closer to your spirit? What's giving you back to yourself? And what is that thing that's keeping you apart, that's challenging you, that's causing you to question yourself and your purpose? Can you even use that to remind yourself of divine truths, to recognize that indeed you do have a relationship with heaven as you do on earth, and that your true spiritual calling is to bring them together, to recognize one that perhaps doesn't exist without the other, but they are made whole in who you are. Jesus tells the parable of a gardener who's seeing a tree that's dying, and the landowner says, well, let's rip it out. And the gardener says, just give me a year to work on the soil, to work on everything else that's nurturing that tree. For those of us who are thinking we're old, rotten trees, for those of us who feel that we have branches in our lives that are no longer bearing fruit, it's time to get back to what feeds our soul and our heart, to nurture that soil around us so that the divine can come forward and help us grow in alignment with who we are and who we want to be again. To close, lastly, from another quote from Tolstoy's The Gospel in Brief. My teaching is the tree of life. The Father is he who cultivates the tree. He cleans and grooms those branches that bear fruit so that even more will grow on them. Hold to my teaching of life, and life will grow within you. And just as the branch does not live of itself, but takes life from the tree, likewise you will take life from my teaching. My teaching is the tree, you are the branches. Whoever live by my teaching of life will bear much fruit. So just moving into prayer this morning, I invite any of our practitioner prayer partners to join me in consciousness by standing or just being present with all of us. I'm so grateful for this spiritual sanctuary that we co-create together. I'm so grateful for each of us who allows ourselves in to the healing that sanctuary can create, to the divine recollection, to that stillness that speaks to us of higher truths, to that grand thirst that proves to us the existence of water. That spiritual thirst, which can only connect us with that which we seek. For I know and affirm it is seeking us as well. That divine partnership of inner knowing, of committing to be a spiritual being within humanity. Knowing and affirming divine healing, divine grace, divine abundance, divine well-being. I know that all of these qualities are but the birthright of our souls as children of the Most High. Allowing this Spirit to speak through us this morning, allowing it to carry on in our conversation through this day and the days to come, may provide us just what we need, even if we can't quite articulate what that is. It's that feeling of wholeness, of being one, of creating meaning through our thoughts, deeds, and actions. May we embrace them here and now, and so it is.